Okay, so in between videos, the only thing I did is I created one more prefab. I figured 4 wasn't quite enough, so same draw. I just dragged a pre-existing one into the hierarchy. I created a new material, applied the material to the object, and then dragged it back into the asset area to turn it into a prefab. So let's get into this now. So what we need to do is we need to create a few lines of code that does 3 things. A, it builds a row of gems, of whatever you want to call these. When the row is done, it builds a second row higher up, and then another one higher up, another higher up. We're going to do a 9 by 9 grid. The third thing that it needs to do is it needs to randomize those. So it needs to make a row of randomized, and then move up to another row of randomized, another row. So there are things that are known as loops, for loops. And what you do is the for loop takes a variable and it gives it a starting value. It says increment it by a certain amount and then end when you reach another value. So for instance, if I want to create a block at -4, -3, -2, -1, all the way to +4, I create a loop that starts at -4, increases with an increment of 1, and then ends at +4. And basically that's what you do. And then same thing, you have to increase the y. So this row is -3, next row will be -2, next one will be -1. So basically you create 2 loops that do that thing, that do those 2 things. And then, like I said, the third part is randomizing. So let's get to it. So the first loop, and we want to do this in the start section, for int, because we're going to use whole numbers, we're not going to use fractions, row number, so clearly we're going through the rows, equals -3. That's going to be the coordinate for this row. Semicolon, row number is less than 6, semicolon, row number ++. So starts at -3, as long as it's less than 6, go ahead and increase the row number by 1. ++ is the same thing as plus equals 1, so it increases by 1. Within that, there's going to be a second loop. For int, column number equals -4, semicolon, column number is less than 5, semicolon, column number ++. So this variable is going to start at -4. As long as it's -5, keep running and increase the value by 1. So those are the 2 loops that are built in each other. We then have to come up with a random number. So let's create a variable up here. So public int, we'll call it which gem, and then we will come down here into our double loop and increment that number. So which gem equals random.range, so it's randomizing a number from a range, and the range is 1 through 6. So why are there 6 if there's only 5 objects we have to choose from? Because despite what the documentation says, this number is supposedly inclusive, and yet it never seems to come up. So if I did 1 through 5, I'd only get results of 1 through 4. So I always increase that by 1 just to be safe. Now what we do is this. And here's where you actually see the instantiation. So the instantiate command has 3 parts to it. It has what is being instantiated, where it's being instantiated, so it has to have 3 coordinates, x, y, and z, and then the rotation of the object that is being instantiated. So what is being instantiated? We'll start off with red object. Where it's being instantiated, new vector 3, and here's where those values come in. So column number, comma, row number, comma, 0. We don't, none of the rows or columns are any closer to the screen than any other, so it's always going to be at 0. So if you click on this, the base, you'll see it's at 0. Now it's just rinse and repeat. So copy, paste. In this case, if which gem is equal to 2, then we want it to be blue. obj, which gem is equal to 3. Oops. Then it will be green obj, which gem is equal to 4. Then it will be yellow obj. And if which gem is greater than 4, that way it covers both 5 and 6, just in case 6 does show up, then it would be orange. Now, one more thing we have to change. Technically, all these objects, since they were built from each other, they have the same rotation. But just to be safe, you should really have the rotation match. So this is the blue object, so use the blue object's rotation. This is green object, so use green object's rotation. This is yellow object, so use yellow object's rotation. And this is orange object, so use orange object's rotation. Then we just have to make sure we've got all of our curly brackets. Okay, so quick summary before we run this. We have 2 nested loops. Nested just means one's inside of the other. And they're simply counting up through the positions that are going to be used for the horizontal and vertical locations of the gems when they get instantiated. For every block that's going to be instantiated, we do a random number, and based on that random number, we then instantiate an object. So that should do it. That should now fill our screen if I didn't make any mistakes, which I may have. Okay, doesn't like that, so why doesn't it like that? Looks like we need one more. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's greater than 5. Oh, greater than 4. There we go. So that's it. You now have your, see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yep. So you've got your 9 by 9 grid of random gems. So let's end there, and in the next one we'll decide how the gems will be moved around. A lot of these games, you click on 2 gems and they switch places. That's really overdone. So if you're going to come up with a new game, I'd say let's try to come up with something a little bit different. I've also seen games where you have to draw a line through the ones that are connected and that removes them. So let's see what we can come up with.